Hello and welcome. I now have a microphone, so that is cool. In this video, we're going to talk about everything you need to know about creatine, and my hope is that I can give you a more detailed but concise explanation than what you will be able to find elsewhere. Now, if you don't already know me, my name is Zachary Keith. I am a certified strength and conditioning specialist and sports nutritionist. I hold a bachelor's in exercise physiology. I'm a current student of physical therapy. I've worked with people in person and remotely in a coaching manner for about 8 years now. And my hope is that you use my free content to build a better understanding of fitness and get better results long term. Now, it's my belief that if you're going to spend money on a supplement month after month, you should know exactly what it does and what you seek to gain from it. Presumably, that's your belief too. So, in line with that, the actual table of contents for this video is going to be what creatine actually does, how creatine can help you build more muscle, strength, and power, how creatine can help your cardiovascular and endurance fitness, cognitive benefits of creatine and benefits to memory recall and things like that, other miscellaneous benefits that have been shown in the research literature, what kind of creatine you should take and how much of it to take, side effects you should be aware of, and then at the end we'll bust some creatine myths that have been around for quite some time. So starting off top of the list, what does creatine actually do? So there's a molecule in our body called adenosine triphosphate, ATP. It's an adenosine molecule with 3 phosphate groups. And this is the molecule that provides most of the energy our bodies use to do work. It's often referred to as the energy currency of the body. It provides this energy by releasing one of its 3 phosphate groups and becomes adenosine diphosphate, ADP. There's a baseline level of ATP in the cells, but it's not a huge amount. So there's a few energy systems in the body whose purpose is to replenish ATP as it is used and turned into ADP so that it can continue to provide energy and you can continue to do more work. These energy systems lie on a continuum from being able to produce energy quickly, but not a large amount of it, to producing energy, a large amount of energy at a very slow rate. One of these energy systems is the creatine phosphate system, and this is the one that can produce energy the quickest, but produces the least amount of it. So as adenosine triphosphate is turned into adenosine diphosphate as more energy is used, creatine phosphate gives its phosphate to the ADP, turns it back into ATP, and that ATP molecule can go back and provide more energy so you can do more work. One of the biggest limiting factors to this reaction occurring in your body is just the sheer amount of creatine that is currently available in your muscles. And the simple solution to that is to supplement with creatine and saturate your muscles with it. Now, we do produce creatine naturally inside the body, and it's found in a lot of foods such as fish and meat, but the amount of creatine you derive from those sources is not nearly enough to reach muscle saturation, which is why supplementation has come into the limelight. So, as we just said, when you supplement with creatine, your muscles over time become saturated with it, and this, for lack of a better word, optimally fuels this energy system. So at the cellular level, but very generally, that's what creatine does. So now let's talk about how creatine can benefit your muscle strength and power production. Now remember, creatine is the energy system that can produce energy the quickest, but it produces the least amount of it. So because of that, it is largely responsible for things in which you hit fatigue, in under 10 to 15 seconds or so. So examples of that include sprinting, jumping, heavy lifting, or other things of that, nature. And in large part, one of the reasons why people notoriously start to significantly slow down after sprinting for about 10 seconds is because those creatine stores run out at around that time. So once your muscles reach creatine saturation, you will be able to either sprint a little bit faster or sprint the same speed for a little bit longer. You'll be able to lift a little more weight or lift the same weight for a few more reps, jump a little bit higher, or any other similar benefit to that nature. And with all of your training sessions being just that much better, over time that will have a compounding effect that will leave you in a much better place than had you not been supplementing with creatine. And as far as dietary supplements go, the actual benefit you get from being pre-creatine saturation to post-creatine saturation, the magnitude of that benefit should not be understated. In most people, it's about a 10 to 20% difference, which is huge as far as, natural things go. And to note, that is not to say that it is an anabolic steroid. It is not. It is nothing like that. It's just a really helpful and effective supplement. So that's like the bird's eye view of how creatine will help you build more muscle, strength, and power. So now let's talk about how creatine can help your endurance performance. So creatine's relation to things like the aforementioned activities have been the sort of main focus in a lot of the research, but creatine does also do a few things that might help endurance. One of which is that it can reduce the workload of subsequent energy systems. So remember, like these energy systems, they line a continuum from producing energy quickly but low amounts to producing energy slowly but high amounts. So if the initial one, the creatine one, is more optimized, then the burden of the workload of the following energy systems will be a little bit less because the creatine system can handle more. Creatine's also been shown to have a slight effect in buffering the buildup of lactic acid, which is something that can inhibit the production of further energy or the production of further muscle contractions. Creatine can also help to improve hydration status and improve the amount of work you can do at any given amount of oxygen, which are all things that would lead someone to believe that creatine might have a benefit to things like cardiovascular exercise and endurance performance. Now, that all sounds cool and fancy, but you can't base claims or conclusions off of mechanisms alone. So, what does the actual outcome research say? So, first off, it seems pretty clear that shorter distance events tend to benefit to a greater degree than longer distance events. So, things like 5K would be more greatly benefited from creatine supplementation than something like a 10K. In regard to steady state work, in that meaning the same level of intensity or the same speed throughout an entire cardiovascular session, the results are kind of mixed, and there doesn't seem to be any sort of clear decision there. However, the reality of most endurance events or field and court sports are that they are not steady state bouts of activity, most of which are long durations of low intensity work interspersed by short bouts of high intensity work. That's very clear in something like soccer or basketball, but even if you're, let's say running a half marathon, there's probably going to be some hills, there's probably going to be some points, maybe at the end of the race where you run a little bit faster than other points in the race. So it's fair to say that, things like that, the actual application of your training aren't going to be super steady state. Or even to digress from pure athletic pursuits, if you imagine, let's say a father chasing his kid around the yard, that's kind of the same idea. In such events, creatine supplementation has been shown to increase the performance on those short bouts of high intensity and improve the recovery from them as a person transitions from that high intensity work to the low intensity work. So it might not be as big of a benefit as you would get from strength performance, but there is a clear rationale there that it has benefits. And also, as always, all of the research that I use to base my claims off of, I'm going to cite in the description box, show notes, whatever you call it, below. So if you are interested in that, feel free to check all that out. So moving into the third topic of the video, we're going to talk about how creatine can benefit you cognitively and help improve your memory recall. Now, this might seem a bit off the wall compared to the sort of, fitness specific things we have talked about so far, but it's worth noting that when you supplement with creatine, it isn't just your muscles that become saturated, your actual nerve cells become saturated as well. Reasonably, this leads researchers to think that there might be some sort of benefit of creatine on cognitive performance. So, in regard to cognition and memory recall, what seems to be the case is that creatine will benefit you under conditions where your cognition is already inhibited by other external things or external environments, but it will not improve your sort of baseline cognitive ability. So, for instance, there is a notable age-related decline in cognitive speed and memory recall. And it's been shown that in people of advanced age, creatine can help improve the speed of cognition, but that does not seem to be the case in younger people. Similarly, a recent study deprived their subjects of sleep and gave one group creatine and the other group a placebo. And then throughout the duration of the sleep deprivation, they gave them certain cognitive tests, and the ones that took the creatine did better than the ones who did not. So I think that was worth bringing up because no, it might not make your baseline smarter, but we're all going to be sleep deprived at some point, or be inhibited cognitively at some point. So it's worth kind of protecting against that when those situations pop up. So those three are the main sort of benefits that really give creatine its notoriety. But to me, the really cool thing about creatine is that it seems to come with a lot of other ancillary benefits that are sort of popping up in the research right now. One of which is an enhanced recovery from exercise. So creatine has been shown to enhance the uptake of carbohydrate into the muscle, which is really beneficial for recovery because, one, recovery itself is an energy demanding process. And it's been shown quite clearly that in people who are deprived of carbohydrate, they experience worse recovery. Similarly, when you have more creatine in the muscle, that will also help contribute more energy. So, the actual kinetics of recovery are increased. And at extreme cases, this can help reduce the risk of overtraining syndrome. Something else of note is that creatine can really help you improve your tolerance to the heat, because as you supplement with creatine and your muscles become saturated with it, they also tend to hold on to a bit more water. And so your hydration status under conditions of high heat tends to be a bit better. There's others that seem to have some basis for them, such as the reduced risk of injury and the increased recovery from injury. However, they don't seem to be strong enough yet in the research, so I'm hesitant to bring them up in this video. But if they do come up over time, I will make further content on them. So next up, what kind of creatine should you take? Because there's multiple forms available on the market. The answer is creatine monohydrate, just flat and dry. 1, it is the least expensive. 2, it is 100% bioavailable. And 3, it helps you reach creatine saturation of 100%. And no other form of creatine, whether it's HCl, whether it's creatine alkaline, has all 3 of those at once. Creatine monohydrate is the answer. Take that one. So how much creatine should you take? Based on the current research, I recommend a minimum of 5 grams per day. There does seem to be some rationale for more, but I don't think it's strong enough yet to make that as a strong recommendation. So today I'm going to say at least 5 grams every day. It does not necessarily matter when you take it because there's no acute effect. And remember, your muscles have to reach saturation for you to realize the full benefit. So if you were to just start out taking 5 grams per day and you did that every day from day 1 to day end of your life, it would take you about 28 days to reach full creatine saturation. If you are impatient and you want to expedite that process a little bit, you can use something called a loading phase. A loading phase is when you take somewhere between 10 to 20 grams per day for 1 to 2 weeks with the goal of getting you to full muscle creatine saturation within those 1 to 2 weeks, and then you just maintain that for the rest of your life. However, long term, there's really no benefit to one over the other. I mean, 2 weeks of being at creatine saturation isn't going to make that much different, in the grand scheme of things. So that is entirely up to you. Plus, once you reach creatine saturation, it takes about 30 days for it to fully leave your system and go back to baseline levels. So if you miss a day here and there, then it's absolutely nothing to worry about. So side effects. Let's talk side effects of creatine. To date, there have been almost 3,000 studies published on its supplementation, and none have reported any adverse effects as a direct result of creatine supplementation. So what do I mean by as a direct result? Now, some people, you'll hear anecdotally people report stomach pain after ingesting creatine. Almost all the time, when this is the case, they are taking creatine on an empty stomach. And if you intake any isolated nutrient on an empty stomach, that can cause stomach pain for a lot of people. If you were to drink, isolated pure protein powder on an empty stomach, in many people, that causes a little bit of stomach discomfort. So as long as you take it with a meal, or at least not a complete empty stomach first thing in the morning, usually that can alleviate that sort of effect. So last, I want to talk about some creatine myths, because there's 3 of note that I think are problematic and just don't seem to go away. And as you may realize at this point, I think this is easily the most important supplement you could be taking, whether it's from a fitness or a health perspective. So I want to break these down so you have full confidence that you're totally safe taking creatine. So the first myth is that creatine causes hair loss. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. This was suggested, the only time this was suggested was in a 2009 study in rugby players, where they noticed a small increase in dihydrotestosterone. And that's a molecule that can, in some cases, correlate with hair loss. However, you have to keep in mind, correlation does not equal causation. And like I said before, you cannot draw conclusions off of mechanisms alone. You need outcome data. Since the inception of that study, numerous outcome studies looking directly at creatine supplementation and hair loss have been done, and none have shown a benefit. And even nothing has even suggested a relationship of any sort since that initial 2009 study. Plus, even in that study, the increase in dihydrotestosterone was very low, and they were still well within physiological ranges. Bottom line, as far as hair loss goes, there is absolutely nothing to worry about. So second myth, I put up a 3 there. Number 2 is that creatine causes fat gain. Now, if you were to snap your fingers and go from your baseline levels of creatine to creatine saturation, there probably would be some notable increase in body weight. However, this is not body fat. What happens is, like I said before, creatine can help your muscles hold a bit more water, and it's that water weight that causes the increase in body weight. And plus, the water is in your muscles, the weight is in your muscles, so that's where you want it, if anything. Now, if this is worrisome to you, then I think you need to reevaluate how much value you actually put into the scale. It's a common mistake to think that the less weight, the better, or the more weight loss, the better, but that couldn't be any further from the truth. If you have a weight loss goal, you should realize that your actual goal is fat loss, not weight loss of any kind. Plus, almost all day-to-day fluctuations in weight are due to changes in water weight. In other words, nothing to do with fat gain or fat loss. Plus, if you ever want to build muscle, which you should, that is going to require some degree of weight gain. So, bottom line, creatine does not cause fat gain. And the final myth is that creatine harms the kidneys. Now, a byproduct of creatine metabolism is something called creatinine, and this is commonly used in blood work to assess kidney health. Now, if creatinine increases spontaneously, that can be a problem. If it increases as a result from creatine supplementation, that does not seem to be a problem. To hammer that point home, a 2019 systematic review and a meta-analysis found that creatine supplementation did not harm or alter kidney function or health despite elevated creatinine levels as a result of the supplementation. So that is it for this video. I hope you found that helpful. If you want my most practical and concise help, I would encourage you to check out the Fitness Simplified Fridays newsletter, which you can find in the description box below. And with that said, I'm going to end that here. Thank you again for being here, and I will see you next time.